Thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar on network security, Don't Be That Guy, presented by Kyle Barron. My name is Laura Lawrence and I'm the Global Marketing Director at Harman. A few things before we get started. Everyone on the call is muted to keep down noise levels during the webinar. However, there is a chat function where you can submit questions to the presenters and they'll try to answer as many questions as possible. This webinar is also being recorded and the link will be made available a few days after this presentation. We do have a number of other webinars taking place over the next few months for audio, lighting, video, and control, and we'd like to encourage you to take a look at the different webinars in our Learning Sessions workshop series on pro.harman.com, as well as visiting HARMAN Professional University to see our many on-demand and certification courses that are available to you for free. And now I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Kyle Barron, the presenter for today's webinar. Kyle has worked in the AV and IT industries for over 10 years, primarily as a system designer, system programmer, network engineer, and network designer. Currently, Kyle serves as a technical trainer for HARMAN Professional University, conducting training sessions for AMX SBSI products. And now I'm going to pass the mic over to you, Kyle.
Hey, thank you very much. Welcome everybody for attending today's webinar on network security, titled Don't Be That Guy. My name is Kyle Barron, and I'm going to guide you through some network security do's and don'ts throughout this webinar, best and worst case solutions and some common things to look for and ways to help protect the network that we use day in and day out for our AV installs. So real quick though, just want to point out the HARMAN Professional University. You can get there by going to pro.harman.com/training. It's a wealth of resource and information on all things HARMAN. All the different manufacturers and product lines are there. We also offer in-person classes as well as online classes to gain certification. We have a audio professional, a network professional, a control professional class. All of these enable you for AVIXA credits, whether you're doing your CTS, CTSI, CTSD, the credits will apply for your RUs that you need in order to maintain your current level of certification. Also right now what we've got going on is we have some, obviously because of the whole COVID-19 and limitations are in place, we're doing a lot of distance learning. And we've got 5 courses that we offer, one of them being the audio designer course. We have a control design course, network AV design, and then we have a JavaScript programming class, and we have a what we call fast track netlinks programming. And really what this is geared towards is if you're already an established programmer, but you want to pick up AMX, you want a little bit of a refresher. This is a 2-day class. You know, soup to nuts, if you will. We move quick, we move fast, but we essentially cover our entire Programmer 1 curriculum, and we get into Programmer 2 a little bit, you know, over those 2 days. But it's a great wealth of knowledge in those 2 days. You know, kind of chasing those shiny objects for a lot of the programmers that are out there. All right, so appreciate that. So let's talk about network security in general, right? You know, in today's age of audio, video, you can even say lighting, right? AVL. The network is becoming more and more dependent upon you know, our gear being on it and us interacting with the network. So we need to take security into account. You know, and with one of those things is, you know, we have these things called attack vectors, and an attack vector is essentially, you know, a means by which an unauthorized person or system can access the equipment, right? Can interact with it. Now, usually a lot of these, attack vectors, are malware, viruses, web pages, pop-ups, a lot of it is social engineered, to gain access. But that still doesn't mean that, those all should still be prevalent. A lot of people say, well, how does that deal with AV? That doesn't necessarily deal with my system. Well, you could have somebody that has opened an email or, might have some type of, compromised system that then goes and plugs into an AV network, and now that system is compromised based on the laptop being there. There are things on the network that utilize several operating systems, Linux, Windows, Ubuntu, all those different types of underlying OSs that if they're not updated, they're not patched, again, right, they create these vectors for malicious actors to, potentially cause disruption and mayhem amongst the infrastructure there. So with that, security, we have components of cryptography, all right? This is also known as CIA, and it's not the shady, the shady organization out there that does things that nobody really knows about. So what CIA stands for in the security world is the first one is confidentiality, right? This is going to be making sure that the data is being encrypted using encryption to hide and mitigate the exposure of that data. The I in it stands for integrity. This uses hashing algorithms and different means to alter the data to protect it while it's being moved from A to B, right? These algorithms ensure that data is unaltered going across the wire, so it's what you put in is what you get out, right? And then availability, right? And what this necessarily boils down to is that making sure that your data is accessible and making sure that the data that is accessible, the person that's accessing it has the right to access it, right? You're making sure that your systems are secure, right? And that's, CIA. So we have confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The IT world is full of acronyms, just as the, AV space is full of acronyms. I really think IT has a ton more that, it seems like every day they're coming up with a new one, or somebody invents something that sounds great to them, but necessarily nobody else really knows what it means. So what we're gonna, so I want to talk about kind of three planes, all right, associated with a network switch. Okay, now we're not going to cover all aspects of a network, right? We're not going to cover necessarily firewalls and switches and routers and load balancers and all these different aspects of an enterprise network. But what I want to talk about is primarily what we use every single day in the AV space, and that is a switch, right? We use a network switch day in and day out for all of our stuff. Whether it's for our control, it's for, getting the control to talk to, the SBSI, or, putting our lighting on there or putting our audio on there, right? We VLAN it, the switch is considered the access layer in the hierarchy, right? So that's what's providing us that initial input into the network world. So we've got what we call three planes, okay? The first one is the management plane, all right? And essentially the management plane is what is used to access, to configure, monitor, the actual device or devices. This is typically, you should only be able to access this from a given location or given machine. This should typically never be allowed to have access, out in the working production environment where it could be compromised. We have what's called the control plane. The control plane is essentially where all of your routing protocols tend to live. Some of those routing protocols, BGP, eGRP, OSPF, so on and so forth, right? There's a few of them there. RIP, those are all routing. Those are some routing protocols there for you. And then the other one that we have is the last one there is the data plane. Okay, this is going to be where most of your data packets are. This is where they're mostly flowing. And it's really, out of the three, the data plane is probably the heart, the main one there, right? That's usually where everything is connected to, is on the data plane itself. So looking at some of these, some of these planes, we obviously see a need to secure these, right, and prevent unauthorized access to these. So there's a couple ways that we can do this. There is what is called an AAA server, right? And what that is a mechanism on the network. It is server-based that allows for the checking of usernames and passwords, as well as it also supports certificate-based mechanisms to guarantee that the person logging in actually has access to it, and it's not trying to authenticate to the local device, which is what the second one is there, right? Local user accounts. So most of the time, whenever we do something with a piece of equipment, in the AV world, we usually, it either never gets changed, right? It's admin password or admin or admin, no password, right? I mean, something very generic, very simple. Or what they do is they simply just create a unique username and password, or they change the password, but that's the only one that they ever create. If you're going to use this method, and understand that, for most situations, you won't be using an AAA server. You will end up using local user accounts. I would encourage and recommend that you set a local account for each individual that would be logging into the device. And I say that because whenever something happens, the first thing that somebody does is they ask, what happened? Why did it happen, and who did it, right? And that who becomes a big problem if 5 people have access to the device and they all use the same login. So now it becomes you've narrowed it down, but really what this does is, by everybody, having their unique password, what this becomes is the question becomes a whodunit. And then the answer there is a whodunit solver, right? Because everybody's got their unique credentials, okay? So talking about passwords, right? That's going to be a big one here, okay? I want to share a recent study. A study was conducted in August of 2019, and what this study addresses is the number of characters up to 18 in a password, and then of that, they tested just numbers only. They tested if they did upper or lowercase, and letters that are mixed, and then they did numbers, upper, lower, and then they did upper, lower, numbers, letters, symbols, the more complex ones, right? And you can see here that this study was done using a rainbow, what's called a rainbow table, and essentially running brute force rainbow tables against devices. And you can see that, if if you only did a 4-character password, I mean, instantly across all of them, it's able to be obtained, right? There really is no time delay. Ultimately, what I tend to lean towards is a 12-character minimum password. Most organizations nowadays set the limit or the minimum to 8, but you can even see here that at 8, I mean, you're looking potentially, within a month or two, someone could easily have your credentials, and most organizations either don't have password change requirements or they're 90 days. So in theory, if you just did the bare minimum of 8 and your organization had a 90-day password refresh, someone could have your password for roughly 30 days potentially and do whatever, which is not good, right? So I typically stay with the 12-character minimum. And then kind of to highlight some of this table here for you, M down here, that means million. The BN is billion. The TN is trillion. You've got QD down here, that's quadrillion. And then you've got QT, which is quintillion. So obviously it's going to take quite a long time. So, I just wanted to, I wanted to express this because passwords are very important, right? A username and a password is essentially how the operation runs. And this goes a little bit further than just the AV network, but just your own personal stuff together for how to do these. Every device should have a unique username and password associated with it. Nothing should ever be duplicated out, kind of giving the keys to the castle, if you will, if everything is the same. So, you want to think about your password here, right? So the big thing, the big new thing, if you will, is a lot of the hackers, hacking organizations, malicious intention, they're actually beginning to use the dictionary, and they have for quite some time, but they're using it more and more at this point because of the commonality of words and people making stuff up that's not really randomized, and it's making it easier, right? So really what you want to do is you want to avoid those those common dictionary style words, and what you also want to do is you want to use some type of phrase, some type of saying that obviously you can easily remember, but it's going to make it more difficult for somebody else because it's a phrase. The biggest example that I can give is there was a commercial on, and it's been a little while since it was on, but it was the commercial of like the nuclear missile launch that was going to happen, and they were asking the one guy for the password to disable it, and his password was "I hate my job," right? That's a phrase, right? Now, obviously, he didn't like his job, apparently, but and everybody thought it was funny. But I mean, there was some truth to that. It was just a phrase that he remembered that he could use that would take somebody a little while to figure out that's what it was. So I want to talk about some myths behind some of these passwords, right? And so this is from NIST. NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, okay? And these are several studies, again, that have been done late 2019, as well as there was a couple done early 2020, that they show a number of things, with the top 3 pretty much being you have a random complexity, a periodic reset, and then a screening of passwords as a way to defeat and cause more hindrance to a malicious actor or actors, right? So let's take a look at this here. So a random algorithmic complexity, all right? What this necessarily is saying is that, using your password complexity by mixing special characters or numbers with in place of letters, has resulted in actually, instead of it being more complex, it actually makes it weaker, for your password. And the reason why is because, as it shows here in the example, people use an L or an I for a number 1. If it's an A, they use the @ symbol. An O is a 0. It's these commonality things that end up causing for weaker passwords because, again, when these people do these lookups, they have already built into their scripts to run against your password how to look for these, right? So it's just something to avoid. The periodic reset. Obviously, one of the big frustrations for any employee, right? You get the message every 30 days or 90 days or whatever your organization is that you have to change your password. And some of you don't even get this message, and it's been a couple years. But this is one of the biggest hassles ever. But this is also can be counterproductive as well, because what happens when you start having to change your password over and over again? Well, you don't want to make up a completely new one, so you generally start incrementing one side of it or doing a different special character, that kind of thing, just to meet their complexity guidelines. But at the same time, it's different, right? Especially when they start doing this, you can't reuse the same password so many times. But again, and it's something interesting, right? So a periodic reset people would think is great to have, but at the same time, when you really think about it, it's actually kind of counterproductive. So you can do a periodic reset every so often, but when you do that, you need to take the initiative to make it absolutely different and not just increment it on the front end or the back end or in the middle or wherever you're doing. Okay, and then screening of passwords. Okay, so this is that newer step that's really going on here, and that is because of them being able to look at you use the dictionary for a lookup, right? They look for common words that are always used. They evaluate passwords for, birthdays, social security numbers, friends, family, all their information. And it's really something that, you want to do is you want to screen the password to make sure that in no way, shape, form, or fashion does it tie to you. It's always recommended that you use some type of, password manager, if you will. Don't keep them on the Post-it note underneath your keyboard or tape them inside your laptop lid or, something like that. Use a secure method to hold on to those sensitive passwords. So looking at some guidelines here. Again, this was put out by NIST, and this was in a special publication, 800-63, that was put out in April of 2019. I believe it was April. It was 2019, and I think it was April. Might have been a little bit later, but this was a special publication, like I said, and these are outlining some of the guidelines for your passwords, right, for that network security. So if you're doing, so a human sets it, that's going to be you. You want to do an 8-character minimum at the least, okay? And that's simply because when we look back at the table, you can see that, if it's 8 characters, it's either instant or it takes them a few days, a few weeks, possibly 2 months, right? Anything before that is darn well near, if not instantaneous, for access, right? So the other one is that if you're generating it from a machine, your password, so that's like, if you have Google Chrome auto-generate your password, or, a password service, Apple suggests it or Samsung suggests it, the minimum there is typically going to be 6. The thing that they also said is that devices should be able to support 64 characters for a max length. There are several applications that are out there that will only allow for 8 characters. They won't allow you to have a 12-character long password, right? And those could be dangerous if you're not careful with them, right? Simply because there's no way to add more complexity to it. As well as all ASCII characters, including the space, should be supported. Currently, there's some passwords engines that people use where they don't allow a space. They might not allow some form of special characters. If it's an ASCII character and printable, then it should definitely be able to be used. So the this is one right here: the truncation of the secret password, or the secret or the password shall not be performed when processed. This is more looking at the machine side. When you put in something that's like 16 characters long, it'll truncate it only to 12. It only lets you use 12. And again, that's kind of going back to that maximum setting there. The other one is check chosen passwords with a known password dictionaries, right? So this is going to be that lookup that's there we talked about. A 6-character minimum. We already said that. That was an error on my side. And the complexity requirements, right? This is going to be a no. They're actually recommending to not enforce complexity requirements because you actually can lead to weaker passwords if you do that. They're saying no expiration periods. I'm going to have to say I disagree with this a little bit. You need to have an expiration period on a password. The deal here is to make sure that you have policies in place to make it so that the passwords are not unique. And I think it's on us to make sure that when we are tasked with resetting the password, that we don't just increment it. We actually create something new. Here's a big one: is password hints, right? This is all part of the social engineering. Everybody today's age, Facebook, LinkedIn, so you still have MySpace. All of these things with these password hints are easily accessible simply because somebody wants to Google your name and find out, what was your best friend in school, or what was the first school you attended, can easily be done, right? So again, no knowledge-based authentication, right? Who was your best friend in high school? Those questions are always pretty funny to me and pretty silly when you do those password hints. I mean, they're easy to figure out. They're easy to take a stab at and guess. Usually, if I get some of those and it's just weird, weirdness with them, like, who was your best friend in high school or something, I'll try to do something different with when I put the name in, if that's the only option, just to create some uniqueness to it that only I'll know. And then the other one is no SMS for two-factor authentication. So the reason that this one is in there is because the possibility to clone and redirect phone numbers in today's age with technology, right? You want to end up using an actual app, such as, here, Google Authenticator, Microsoft's Factor Authenticator, one of those that it's linked and synced to that organization's two-factor system, and it doesn't just text you a code. I mean, at the end of the day, if that's all you've got to work with, so be it. If two-factor is available, I always choose it. I always recommend to choose it. You've heard a lot of stories recently and in the past about, one of the big ones was Ring, and Nest, with people accessing cameras, and having conversations or, spying. And, as scary as that sounds, a lot of that was simply because they failed to turn on two-factor authentication. Right? So, usually what happens when you do anything with two-factor authentication is you put in your password, it's going to send you that code. You'll know right away, hey, someone's trying to get into my stuff. And, you should immediately change your password if you didn't request that, right? Because somebody clearly has your username and your password, and they are trying to access your account. So, that's another good way to know that, things are going there, right? So that's my password piece. I know it was a bit much, but it's also very, very important in today's digital age. So let's talk about some network management now, right? So, and again, we're going to talk about some switches. So one of the big things is you want to, anytime you do anything with a network switch, the examples that I'll be showing here are based on Cisco. Again, this applies to anybody, whether it's Extreme, Netgear, any one of those with a CLI. You're going to want to enable a password. Okay, what this enable password does, all right, is it actually encrypts all of the passwords on the particular configuration, right? So nothing is in plain text. That goes along with the encryption password, right? So I'm sorry here. So encryption password enables all of the passwords to be encrypted inside of the file. The enable password gives the switch password authentication before you go into the admin command prompt, the elevated prompt, to go in and start making actual changes to the running config on that switch, right? So those are both crucial, is the enable password and the encrypt password anytime you go to set something up. Another thing that should be enabled is maximum login attempts, right? So if the device has the ability to do anything with max login attempts, you should do that. Because what you can do is after so many, say after 10 login attempts, you can disable that account from trying to log in for a day, 2 days, 10 days, forever until you re-enable it. Just don't do that to the only admin account on the switch, otherwise you're stuck. So that should be, that should be there. The control access, all right? So control access is, pretty special, right? And this is definitely one of the most important ones of the switch, right? You don't want to give everybody access to the management plane if they don't need it. You can easily give somebody management access, but then you can give somebody management access, but restrict them to only be able to, say, look at the configuration. They won't be able to make changes, but they can read it, or they can make minor changes. Everything is very granular inside of some of these switches that can be used to manage. All right, so that's really important there. Enable logging. This one is important. If something happens, you want to know what happens. Okay, and in order to do that, you have to enable logging. All right, on a network switch, as well as it's probably important that you know what time that event happened. and you're going to get that from NTP. All right. So that's going to be those two, right? Is to make sure that the NTP is set up. Now, sometimes, if these are standalone systems, they're not connected. It's a good idea to go ahead and just enable it statically, so that you've set the time, you've set the date, and then you can always go back and just do a show time and look at the actual time and date, and then figure out how many minutes it's off, or is it a day off, or something like that, right? But then it'll be able to give you a little bit of reference. But enabling NTP is always going to be the best, because you're going to have that upfront and close date and time for when that issue occurred. Login protocols, right? So, this goes to everything that we put on the network. If you use Telnet, you are essentially passing all of your information in the clear, meaning that using any type of sniffer or packet inspection tool such as Wireshark, I can read, or somebody can read, every single piece of data that you type onto that web, right? Wireshark is the key to the internet, okay? You can do all kinds of crazy stuff with that thing, like scary stuff with Wireshark, to the point that the utility can even reproduce voice over IP calls based on packets. It can stitch the call back together as if they were listening directly while you were having that conversation. So you want to avoid as much of that as you possibly can. You want to turn Telnet off. You want to use SSH. A lot of times Telnet is on by default for configuration and setup. You should always, as a last resort on your checklists, for any time you're commissioning something or turning something over, you always want to make sure that you have turned Telnet off and turned SSH on the device. That's because once you turn SSH on, it's encrypted, right? It's handshaking a certificate between itself and your machine before it's going to let anything pass. So all that text, all that communication, those settings, everything is obscured. So the first thing that I always do anytime that I go to do a switch is I will immediately, the first thing that I do is Telnet gets turned off, and then I immediately begin to use SSH, so that if there was somebody out there that was recording using a utility or a tool, all they're going to see is that initial connection for Telnet being turned off and SSH going on, and then after that they've got to do a lot of work to be able to intercept and obtain that certificate, right? So looking at specific protocols, if you don't need it or you're not using it, turn it off, right? The same thing goes for, in a sense here, right? So, if we go to look at this, and we look here, you can see that, FTP, right, is being denied. So anything that comes into this IP range for FTP is going to be disallowed. So what they're saying is that, hey, you can connect to this, but you're not going to be able to use an FTP service, all right? And then what we're actually looking at here is an access control list or an ACL, all right? And these are generally set up on access level switches and routers is where these are. And you can see here that this is the order, 10, 15, 20, those are all assigned. And then permit or deny, okay? And then the statement typically behind it is what follows, all right? So this is what an ACL list looks like. And you use ACLs to control, what is allowed to different parts of the network, what would be allowed to communicate with another part of the network. That's typically what an ACL is used for. And it's implemented at that access layer of the network. Some other ways to secure these are MAC reservations. This used to be the biggest and baddest thing that was out there, but with the ability to clone and spoof a MAC in today's age, this is just pretty much a speed bump for a lot of people trying to gain access. The 802.1x, this is an IEEE protocol for port-based network authentication. Where you typically see 802.1x is in Wi-Fi. It's very heavily used in Wi-Fi. What this does is it uses either a username or password, or it uses a certificate that's issued out from a certificate authority from that enterprise, and then what that does is it goes back to a radius or what's called a TACX server, and those are authentication servers that do just that. They authenticate that username and password or that certificate, and then they apply the appropriate permissions to the port that is trying to be accessed or to the connection. So our SVSI, product and our NX series, these DGX, DVX, these all support 802.1x as well as LDAP integration for, more security and ways to lock things down. So VLANs, right? So, one of the coolest things is being able to pull a network switch out of the box, plug everything in and go, I'm done. That's great, except that by default, all enterprise network switches that have VLAN capability, they all have something called VLAN 1. And typically every port is assigned to VLAN 1. There are some switches that are not, but for most of them they are. But VLAN 1 is actually one of the most sought out and attacked VLANs on a network for a couple reasons. The first being that they know most people don't change it. The other big one is that most IT managers still leave all of their management connections and interfaces on VLAN 1. So, if they can get access into VLAN 1, then they can access the entire network and pretty much bring it to its knees pretty easily and quickly. But I am a big opponent, a big advocate for the physical port deterrence. If you're not using it, turn it off, right? It's kind of like a light. If you want to save energy in your house, turn it off. If you want to keep somebody out of your house, lock your door and your windows. Same thing applies for your network. If you want to keep somebody out of it, don't give them an easy, port to connect to, an easy door to walk through. I mean, you're inviting trouble. So what I always recommend is you disable the port, as well as you create a VLAN that is what I call just a trash VLAN. It's a VLAN that doesn't go anywhere. It stays on that switch. It doesn't even go across to another switch, across an uplink if there's multiple. It is just an abandoned VLAN, something other than one. The other thing I do is I always shut VLAN 1 down. There's a company, Netgear, right? And they make a very good switch that works very well with our SVSI product, right? Works out of the box. One thing that we've done is because their switches all come with VLAN 1 enabled, we've taken one of their configurations and we've just changed it so that it's VLAN 999, which was the default SVSI VLAN. But again, we shut one down and we went to 999, trying to provide that, extra layer of protection and security to the switch and ultimately to the client. Another aspect, and one of my final ones here in talking about security is DHCP snooping. We've all had this problem where, somebody inevitably plugs in an all-in-one router into the network, and all of a sudden, all the IP addresses have changed and everything is different, all right? That is what is referred to as a rogue DHCP server on the network. And you combat that, okay, by doing DHCP snooping. And what this does is the ports have two states, either untrusted or trusted. And by default, all the ports are set to untrusted. Okay, so whenever you enable DHCP snooping, all the ports are untrusted. What you do is you actually input the DHCP snooping and the IP address of that server, of the DHCP server, and then you configure the port that DHCP server is connected to, or that traffic will be coming from, as trusted, so that it obviously won't shut down. Because then that way, if somebody were to come with that all-in-one router from whomever makes it and plugs it in, what it's going to do is it's going to disable that port. You can do it a couple ways. You can just flat out disable it and never turn on again, or you can actually set it up so that the port will shut down, and then you can set a time limit so that it will actually turn the port back on and recheck. And if there's still a violation, it'll re-shut down again and restart that process. But if the violation's been cleared, then it'll stay on. And I guarantee it that somebody's going to plug this into 2 or 3 different ports before they finally figure out that something's not right. Now, this DHCP snooping, it's not always guaranteed to work. It works in most instances. There are some scenarios, some deployment scenarios where this isn't applicable. It just won't work because of topology or the method of how we're communicating. So if you ever have any questions about that, make sure that you do some research, reach out to our tech support, and they can help with some stuff like that. But most of the time, this is very much applicable and will work. And with that, Laura, do we have any questions? Does anybody have any questions? I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I was muted.
Oh, no worries. No worries.
This question is asking, how do we best protect ourselves from security issues from things like Zoom, which is still prioritizing access and flexibility over security, can't be fully installed, is increasingly used in the corporate entertainment and personal spaces, and is also increasingly being included at some level in physical professional hardware?
Very good question. So, a lot of the Zoom issues and vulnerabilities have all been brought upon by the whole COVID-19 pandemic. So some of those. So I would always say to check the Zoom documentation for their up-to-date security measures and policies that are in place. But some of those that are there are, it's the username and password, right? That's going to be the key. One of the things is never use your personal room for a meeting. Always randomly generate the meeting link. Use a password to secure your meeting. And then the other one is you can always enable a waiting room so that you can bring those participants into that meeting. If you bring a participant in, you can actually communicate with people in the waiting room using that utility, because sometimes people's Zoom names don't match, whatever name they registered with. So you can compare and contrast, who should be there, who shouldn't. Outside of that, if you experience, what I think has been called a Zoom bomb, where people just start doing things. You do have the ability to, evict someone from that meeting. You can just kick them out with a simple click of the button, and they can't come back in. That's pretty much my recommendations for that.
Okay, the next question is asking, with so many venues, mainframes, accounts, et cetera, that require a password, is there a database you would recommend that would help us remember all the new passwords created? Not a piece of paper, but maybe Excel or an app.
Sure. Yeah. So there's several apps that you can use on your on your smartphone, on your computer. Just to to kind of name I'll just throw a couple out there. There is Google Chrome has a built-in password browser, if you will. Mozilla Firefox has another one. Those both tend to be free. There's some paid ones. LastPass is a paid one, and those are basically what those do is you just, as soon as you save a password, you can save that into that database, and then you can access it from any one of your devices. Apple has their cloud, their password capabilities as well.
Okay, the next question is asking, what is the part number of the Netgear switch used with SBSI that you mentioned?
Sure. So those switches are going to be, there's several part numbers, so I'll give you the series. It's the M4300 series and the M4500 series. And really what those are is the 4300 is your traditional access layer switch. Comes in multiple varieties and flavors. And again, it does work with our product right out of the box, which is awesome. And then the 4500 is more of a top of rack, what's called a top of rack switch. It's kind of an aggregate that everything would connect to. So think of like a hub and spoke style environment. All your edge or your spokes, they would all connect back to that 4500 in a typical deployment. That's what that top of rack is.
Okay, the next question is asking, what do you do with that trash VLAN? Should unused ports be assigned to it?
Oh, so my VLAN that I just call my trash VLAN. Yeah. So if I have a port that is not being used, that I don't have a configuration for, I will assign it to that unused or my trash VLAN, and then at that point I will shut the port down also, right? So it's kind of a two-step process. For someone to have to get in and enable the port and then reassign the VLAN. The name of the game for security is you want it to be harder than the other guy. The more steps and the more processes and the more difficult you make it, the less likely you will be to end up being that guy. But at the end of the day, the true thing for security is that at the end of it, if they want it in bad enough, they're going to. But that's what I do with my VLANs.
Okay, it looks like that's the last question that came in. Thank you, Kyle, for presenting, and thank you, everyone, for attending. Before we sign off, I'm going to share 3 different links with you in the chat box, so just hold on for one quick second here. I get asked for these links all the time. So the first one is a link to our HARMAN Professional University. So you're able to access our thousands of hours of curriculum, content, and certifications. So that'll give you an overview of the information, and it will also get you to the registration page to sign up. The second link is our playlist on YouTube, where we post all of our webinars once we've recorded them. And the third link is to our full calendar of upcoming webinars. So thanks again for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.